Peace and welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, we got a lot to get to. First and foremost, there is some buzz in Washington that not only is Governor Ron DeSantis a possible candidate, a viable candidate for president, but what about South Carolina Republican Senator Tim Scott? Yeah, the Black Republican is getting some nods from top GOP leaders about a presidential run. We'll talk about that. Also, let's talk about a new data, how it's being used in a new lawsuit of Black plaintiffs saying that State Farm Insurance has used racial bias in a number of ways to keep Black homeowners from being properly served. We'll talk a little bit about that. And I got to talk about Twitch and mental health conversation, as there has been some more details about what happened on that tragic night that our brother had committed suicide, allegedly committed suicide. We'll talk about that and so much more. So stay with us, folks. We got a lot to get to. And of course, we want to hear from you to join us online. So stay with us. It's all happening on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. First and foremost, happy Thursday. That's right, happy Thursday, folks. And we're certainly glad that you're able to join us today. Get ready to join us in the conversation, as we got a number of discussions that are on the agenda today that I think it speaks to where we are right now on a number of issues. So let's jump right in, shall we? First and foremost, let's talk about this idea of Senator Tim Scott. Y'all know who Senator Tim Scott is, right? Oh, well, you say, well, who is he? Well, he is the few major Black Republicans that hails from South Carolina that is showing that he may be, and there's some talk about it in Washington, according to Politico and some other reports, that he may be a viable candidate for president. Senator Tim Scott may be a viable president for a viable candidate for president. Wow. Now, considering the field of potential of contenders here for the big seat, you know, there has been much talk around Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida joining in. There has been some talks of maybe some other possible larger national GOP leaders, but Senator Tim Scott presents a different perspective that the GOP could grab from the bench. If we put this in a sports analogy, folks, the bench is not too deep, but he could be a game changer. Here's what folks at Politico had to say about the senator when they looked at the weight that he carries within the Republican Party. Take a look at this, folks. The South Carolinian has carved out a unique lane in the GOP, well liked by mainstream leaders like Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, but never publicly at odds with the Trump world, even when he's offered halted criticism of the former president. And as the only Black Republican senator, he offered his party a compelling chance to build on its long-running effort to boost diverse candidate recruitment by further appealing to Democratic-leaning constituencies. Woo! Here he is, folks. Trump who? GOP senators rave over a potential Tim Scott presidential run. Now, folks, I'm going to just share with you also what a couple of people are saying. Lindsey Graham, who has been a Trump supporter from the very beginning, even though not from the very beginning, but I will say since President Trump was in office, he was a Trump supporter. But he likes Senator Tim Scott. He said that Tim Scott will, quote, bring something to the table on day one, and adding that his South Carolina colleague has one of the most compelling stories of any Republican out there. Politico also went on to say that Scott's not personally chatty about the prospect of a 2024 presidential run, declining to talk, but his Republican colleagues are buzzing about his massive re-election victory this year, rising national profile, substantial fundraising hauls, and cross-country travels for other candidates, and they're happy to talk him up. Oh my goodness. Now, I didn't, you know what? It's so funny, folks. And I want y'all to join me for the discussion. Post your comments in our YouTube chat, Facebook chat. Folks, post in our as we're streaming live on Black Star Network. But this, out of all the conversations that we've been having about potential GOP presidential candidates, Tim Scott, I'm a little embarrassed that I didn't even say it. Like, think of like, wait a minute, hold on. They can go deep down the bench and they can pull Tim Scott out because guess what? I mean, we know he's a Black Republican senator. We know that. I mean, we know that of his involvement from the George Floyd Police Act, Justice for Policing Act, and how he kind of just bumbled and he didn't stick to his promise on that. But that's to Black America. But what about to the GOP? Did y'all remember seeing him? Have y'all ever, and if you have never heard him spoke, I mean, he's passionate. He's been on this train of thought, I would say, of trying to make the GOP more diverse. He's been always, every time he speaks of his family's history and why he has become a Black Republican, right? He doesn't seem to mind being out there, kind of being the poster child for this level of the GOP using him as a way to bring more Black folks, bring more diversity to the party. So I'm personally thinking to myself, like, man, Senator Tim Scott. Now, Ron DeSantis, we could talk all day about him. We could talk about the crazy things that he's done, but we could certainly talk about the fact that he is a person that has been in political office for years in Florida. So he understands the dynamics of Florida politics, but to cross over into the national stage is a big cross. But Tim Scott for the GOP. What do y'all think about this? I want you to share your thoughts, post your comments, and let's jump right into it, because I personally had to really digest on this one. All right, before we take our first pause, let's go to a couple of our comments from our online culture crew. Shalinda kicking us off this afternoon. Shalinda, good to hear from you. You said Tim Scott is just another yes man. He's a company man, Shalinda. Shalinda, he's a company man. But guess what? That's what the GOP needs at this time. Trump was not a company man. Trump is a Trump man. But the GOP right now, to bring some stability back to the party, they need a person that's going to be a company man, a yes man. Shalinda, thank you so much for your thoughts. Appreciate you. Let's go to Marcus Jackson. Marcus, you checked in and you said, but they're trying, Farajii, they're trying to throw him up there as a more qualified Herschel Walker Black candidate. Straight tokenism. Look, hey, Marcus, I don't know if you have had or have heard this part of the discussion. And we all knew that Herschel Walker was just a car crash. And the fact that they even went into a runoff, I mean, I think a lot of us thought, oh my gosh, Herschel Walker, he won't even last. But he got into the runoff, right? Imagine if they did have a Tim Scott against a Raphael Warnock. I mean, just think about it. Tim Scott is much more composed. He's much more marketable. He understands he understands the assignment, folks, for the GOP. So imagine that. Imagine if they had a Tim Scott type of character in Florida, Black Republican, that spoke to those interests down there. Imagine. Do you think, and look how close the election was with Herschel Walker. Do you think that Raphael Warnock would have had pulled out a victory if they had a Tim Scott type of Republican, Tim Scott mannered, Tim Scott presented candidate down in Florida? Marcus, you know what I mean? We got to put our thinking caps on, bro. I don't know. Truth is power. Let's hear what you real quick. You said Tim Scott is Herschel Walker 2.0 with an education. Yeah, but again, look how far Herschel Walker was able to get. Look how far he was able to get. Look, I got to take a quick pause, my first pause of the show. When we come back, more thoughts around this. I'm going to share with you some more details of why the GOP may be considering the South Carolinian for a presidential bid. Stay with us. That discussion's up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, you're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back. We have been talking about the prospect, the idea that is floating around Washington, especially among the GOP, about presidential candidates. Look, guys, look. Didn't I say the moment that these November elections would end is the beginning of the conversation about the presidential elections? We all know that. GOP is on it. Now, they're floating out some ideas publicly. So the Democrats have to, I'm sure the Democrats are taking notes of this, but they're already looking at a certain type of person. So Ron DeSantis, everybody's been talking about him. But what about the possibility of a Tim Scott, Senator Tim Scott, the only black senator? He's a Republican. He's from South Carolina. When you hear him speak, he speaks of a certain level of, I would say, and some of you already said, tokenism. And I don't think he minds being, I think he already knows that, but I don't think he minds being that because he still has the ability to stand on his own 2 feet. He still comes across as a man who makes his own decision. Now, I'm just talking about based on presentation. I'm not talking about what the policies that he has voted for and the policies he stands against. I'm just saying to the presentation, he comes across as being a very marketable alternative, especially as a black Republican. He comes across as being very marketable. And so I'm just throwing it out there to you as our online culture crew. What do you think if the GOP is starting to say, okay, we have a Ron DeSantis. We know which school of thought he's coming from. But Tim Scott, we bring him off the bench. He has a national appeal. He's still, he hasn't had any real issues with the Trump people. I mean, even though he spoke against the former president, he still is able to, he got the support of the top GOP leaders who wouldn't mind putting their weight, their political weight behind a man like him. What do you think? Join us in this conversation as we're talking about, is Tim Scott a viable GOP presidential candidate? Viable one. Y'all want to hear what I have to say about it? I think so. I think so. I think so, folks. All right, let's go back to what you got to say. Truth is power. You said we should have had Cory Booker. We should have had Mandela Barnes. We should have had Val Demings. We should have had Cheryl Beasley. But until we learn unity and voting, our numbers here we are. Okay. Good point. You want something? Truth is power. I get you. And they may come up in the presidential conversation. I don't know. I don't know if it really is in their best interest if they could not get a seat on a statewide level, if it's in their best interest to go for the presidency. You know, maybe Cory Booker, maybe. You know what I'm saying? But for Val Demings, Cheryl Beasley, I think here's my take on this. If you can't win your state, right? I don't see, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong on this. This is just me thinking, like, if you can't win your state, how will you plan to win the country? That's how I'm thinking. Now, I may be wrong, but in my understanding of how politics go, like, you really do need that push, that momentum from your state, because people see that. We can name a number of candidates that have ran for the big seat, right? Then they come out of the state place, you know what I mean? A state position. It's easier. You can get the momentum. You can speak to your experience. You could talk about, you know, working with both on the state side and working with the federal government side. I mean, it's just an easier case when you coming from the state as a state legislator, as a state lawmaker, as a state political official versus no one who has never held state experience. You might not even held local experience, but you want to talk about jumping into the presidential experience. That's a harder sell to the American people, which is why I think there are so many people that are talking about Ron DeSantis. He just won his second election. He won that re-election landslide. So there is momentum. At least people know that in a battleground state such as the state of Florida, boom, he can get Florida. That's the thinking. So with Tim Scott, with him being the person that he is, he's a state representative, and then at the same time, he's a part of Congress as a Black Republican and the only Black Republican senator. He's got some appeal, folks. I think he really got some appeal. All right, let's talk a little. Alana, you checked and you said Tim Scott is a viable candidate. He resonates with his base. And guess what, Lana? You think, and you know what I'm about to say, Lana, just like I know what I'm about to say. His base isn't just with GOP. His base actually is Black folks within the Democratic Party. When there is the conversation about us, you know, joining the party to kind of infiltrate the party, or for us to join the party to redefine the party, well, guess what? You're going to have to go through Tim Scott. You're going to have to go through Tim Scott. Right now, he is the model Black Republican. Hate to say it like that, Tim, but that's what it is. We're going to have to see how he moves. And how he moves, now everybody's going to start to see even more, even scrutinize it even more. So to your point, Lana, yeah. Marcus, Corinna, you checked in and said Tim Scott thinks he has a chance at POTUS. What you say? Ha! With the failure of one caricature, I highly doubt the GOP is willing to take that chance again. I thought so too. But did Herschel Walker really fail? Come on, y'all. Come on. Did Herschel Walker really fail? You mean to tell me the GOP, who knew of all of Walker's shortcomings and flaws and issues as a candidate and as a person, look how far he has gone, folks. I mean, that election was a nail-biter between him and Raphael Warnock. So was it really a failure, or was it an exercise to see where people was going? if you had that many people, and I think the numbers was like 1.6 million people in the state of Georgia, who voted for Herschel Walker in spite of all of the other stuff that happens and that happened in his life, was it really a failure? Or was it a test? Because like I said, if you were to put a Tim Scott type of a candidate in Georgia against Raphael Warnock, who do you think would have won? Who do you think would have won? All right, Willie, appreciate you, Corinna. Willie, you checked in and said, in order to get the black vote, you have to connect with the culture. Tim Scott doesn't. True. But guess what? Tim Scott can talk about how he can speak to the pain of being black as part of the system and how he's looking. He can redefine himself. Essentially, that's what I'm saying, Willie. You will know it and I know it. He can redefine himself in some way, shape, or form. He won't get a majority of blacks. Trump, for example, didn't get a majority of blacks. He just needs just enough to get him over. And Tim Scott could be that guy to get just enough to get him over. Because there are so many disappointed black folks right now in the Democratic Party. So many disgruntled black folks right now. All right. And David, you checked and said Tim Scott isn't even influential to his party's politics, just a walking talking point. But guess what? He's a company man, and they could do a lot to shape a company man. They can do a lot with the yes man. You can shape him. He still has a powerful story. His grandmother being raised by his grandmother, coming up through, Jim Crow and all of those things. He's still got a powerful, compelling story. He does have the support of Mitch McConnell and Senator Lindsey Graham. He put enough money behind him. His story could sound real pretty. Now, to us, we might say, man, he don't connect with the culture. But this is politics. You could redefine who else hell, if you could take a man like Trump and make him into a viable presidential candidate and then he becomes president, you mean to tell me you couldn't do the same thing for Tim Scott with enough money and resources behind him? This is going to be interesting in 2024. Look, I got to take another pause. When we come back, let's switch gears, talk about national politics, to talk about what's going on with black homeowners, as a new study has shown that there's racial bias that has been used and discrimination that's been used by State Farm Insurance, and how some plaintiffs are using it as part of a major lawsuit against the insurance company. Stay with us. That discussion is up next with Dr. Jason Nichols here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the culture here on the Black Star Network. Now it's time for us to shift gears to have a separate another important conversation, which is about home ownership, and more importantly, about what insurance company, how one insurance company may have used a level of racial bias and discrimination against Black homeowners. This is the case according to a latest study that was done by YouGov and a report that was done by the New York Times, to show that State Farm Insurance, the insurance company, the largest insurance company, home insurance company, it shows that there has been a high level of discrimination and racial bias against homeowners. So much so that Black homeowners have now filed a class action lawsuit against State Farm Insurance, and they're using the data from the report, from the study, as part of their case to strengthen their case that something needs to be done. This is what the New York Times reported. Take a look at this, folks, and then we'll jump into this conversation with our brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, Senior Lecturer of the African American Studies Department at the University of Maryland. But take a look at this. This is what the report says. That Black plaintiffs said the survey showed that Black homeowners had to do more paperwork and navigate more interactions with claims adjusters compared with white customers before State Farm would agree to compensate them. The study, which was conducted over the course of 9 months in 2021, relied on YouGov, a polling and data analytics firm. It was inspired by a December 2020 report in the New York Times describing the difficulties that Black homeowners had in getting insurers to pay their claims, the researchers said. The study found that Black customers were 20% more likely to have to talk to a State Farm representative on at least 3 separate occasions before having their claims approved. They were also much likelier to have to submit extra paperwork. The Times report noted that although plenty of Black homeowners had stories to tell about their treatment by insurance companies, take a look, the absence of publicly available data made it difficult to evaluate whether individual cases amounted to a pattern of discrimination, largely because insurers keep information about their claims secret. Take a look at that, folks. So now, when we look at discrimination, racial bias, it is now part of this larger class action State Farm racial discrimination lawsuit. I wanted to bring my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, Senior Lecturer for the African American Studies Department at the University of Maryland, to join us in this part of the discussion. Dr. Nichols, how are you, dear brother?
Hey, I'm doing good. I'm blessed. How are you?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. First and foremost, let's talk a little bit about this situation, because this is not the first time. And I mean, I think there have been a number of conversations, particularly over the past 2 years, where Black homeowners have said they have felt discrimination from everybody, from various companies, when it comes to insurance, when it comes to housing, real estate sales, when it comes to the issue of when the home assessments. I mean, everything in the home buying process, Black folks have been taking a hit. And now you have this new data to show that there was a level of bias based on a number of patterns, that there's a level of racial bias and discrimination. Now Black plaintiffs are using this to strengthen their case. Does it strengthen their case first of all, does this strengthen their case against this major company of State Farm Insurance?
I think it absolutely does. We all remember, of course, Tim Scott says that we don't live in a racist country. Just want to remind everybody of that. But
now you got to bring up Tim Scott, huh, brother? Hi, Doc. Got to bring up Tim Scott. Okay, all right.
I had to bring him up. Although I will just say really quickly that I've been predicting that he will be vice president of the United States should the Republicans win. I think he's going to be the commodity running mate to juxtapose with Kamala Harris. So I think you're going to get DeSantis is going to court him if he wins. And it also is this, really superficial way of saying we're not racist. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, in terms of this home ownership issue, we know that this has been such an issue for Black people. accrue wealth for so long. And we've seen recently with, of course, you referenced the fact that people's the value of their homes has gone up and down, as much as $500,000, $500,000 based on the perceived race of the owner. So again, this has been an issue, but it's not just home ownership. It's if a pipe bursts, these companies, we know that insurance companies are oftentimes can be predatory anyway. They want you to pay in, but they don't want to pay out. But we know that this is just establishing that there is a pattern of trying to abuse Black homeowners. So you get through the first hurdle, which is home ownership. We know that about only 40 some odd % of Black people are homeowners as opposed to 70% of whites. And we know that that is the primary way of accruing wealth. You can't inherit. I can't pass on to my children my income, but I can pass on wealth, and wealth comes in assets. And the largest asset that most of us will ever own is a home. So you get past that in a home, but of course, as any homeowner can tell you, there's always something that happens. Like There's always, like I said, a pipe leaking, a water heater breaks, and you pay insurance for these types of things. And or you live in Florida, there's a hurricane, but yet they're making Black people go through these extra steps to try to literally tire them out. And sometimes, people will have to sell their homes. You got mold in your home because of a flood or something like that. You may actually have to sell your home and sell your asset. So this is something that is predatory. And I hope that these homeowners actually do get their just due with this lawsuit, with this data coming out. And I think it does strengthen their case.
Now, this is interesting. A couple of things. Here's what some of the key metrics that the researchers of this report looked at. They looked at measurements like the number of interactions that claimants had with State Farm representatives, the length of time it took for a payment to be made after a claim was filed, and the amount of extra paperwork that State Farm asked for before agreeing to pay a claim. One of the plaintiffs in the case, she made this very point that you got to jump through all of these hurdles, so you got to do this extra paperwork. But to take them, like you just mentioned, through all of these extra steps, it's almost like the insurance company not just want to tire for Black folks out, they want to act like we don't believe you. So tell us your story once again. Then you get to the next person. Tell me the story once again until they find some discrepancy or some issue with that. And if you could speak on that, Doc, like what does that do for Black folks, particularly who are first-time homeowners, particularly young families? You got to go through all of this. Is a big company. This ain't no mom and pop shop here. Right. This is the same company that has a Black man, Jake from State Farm, as their pitch man for State Farm Insurance. And you got a Black man as the face of State Farm, but you're treating Black folks greasy.
Yeah, I thought that was Allstate that had the Black guy. But
is that Allstate?
Yeah, I think that's Allstate.
No, that's Jake from State Farm. No, Allstate got the other. Allstate got what's it, brother?
That's Allstate, man.
He got the the one with the deep baritone voice. Yes, you're in good hands with. They got a Black man too.
Yeah, it's funny.
Jake from State Farm with the tan khakis and a red shirt. Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I think it's interesting as a consumer, and Black people feel this oftentimes, where it goes from an insurance claim to an interrogation, and Black people are oftentimes subject to this. There's actually a sociological phenomenon called everyday racism. And this is part of it. So you go to the doctor's office, the doctor is not really paying attention to you. He's not listening to you. He gives you, kind of the cold shoulder. Then you go and you have an interaction with the police and they treat you like you're a suspect. And then you have interaction with your insurance company that you pay. You pay premiums every month and they treat you like you're a suspect. That is everyday racism, and it is tiring. And there is literal
research that says that it's detrimental to Black people's health. When you over and over and over again, and when you feel like you're being interrogated, you feel like you're not being trusted, you're not being treated like your neighbor would be treated. That literally weighs and wears down Black people. And it's something that we've been going through for a long time. But again, as I said, you know, Tim Scott will tell you that's not racism. Racism, you know, we're not a racist country.
Absolutely.
He'll tell you all these stories about Jim Crow, but then say it's not racist.
Right. Which is crazy. Look, I got to take a quick pause. When we come back, when we come forward, we're going to continue the conversation with Dr. Jason Nichols. We want to hear from you. What's your take on this latest piece of news around State Farm Insurance and using it? That's a study to show that there's racial bias and discrimination for a class action lawsuit against the insurance company. Share your thoughts, and we'll continue the conversation on the other side. You're tuning into The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, we have been talking about the State Farm discrimination lawsuit. This is a lawsuit that was brought on by a number of Black plaintiffs across the country representing over six states when they brought a lawsuit saying that the insurance company has practiced racial bias and discrimination in getting home loans, insurance claims filed to insurance claim paid. And as a result of that, they're saying that there is some systemic racism, racial bias, and discrimination that's done right now. And as a result of that, of course, State Farm is saying, no, we're not doing that. We're just trying to cross our T's and dot our I's. But according to a new study, racial bias and discrimination is a common practice when State Farm engages with its Black insurance owners. So this is a lawsuit that is strengthening, that Black plaintiffs are hoping will strengthen their case in a class in court that will allow them to be compensated for the claims, and more importantly, allow them to be compensated because of the damage that was done and the racism that continues to be expressed by the insurance company. We've been talking to Dr. Jason Nichols, senior lecturer of the African American Studies Department at the University of Maryland, giving us his insight. And we certainly want to hear from you. Join us in the conversation. Post your comments in the chat on YouTube, Facebook, and the Black Star Network, and let's continue to have the discussion. All right, Doc, I want to bring you back into it. Let's hear from a couple of people. Lana checked in and said, look, the criteria for a FEMA loan is predicated by the outcome of insurance claims. So government loans are even tied to the racist insurance claims. So when you deal with, if the insurance company is not, take you through all these hoops for your claim, and then you have a national natural disaster that may hit your area, hit your home, now you got to go through another layer of processing. You got to make sure that you can get your home is protected. I mean, this is just madness. This is just madness. And this is coming from one of the top insurance companies in the country, where they're just generating millions upon millions of dollars off of Black homeowners. What do you see, Doc, as being yes, we take this thing to court, But it just seems like this is not just a court case. There is something inherently wrong that I think that the community, those of us who may not even be State Farm insurance customers, how do we respond to something like this?
Well, I think what you're doing is really important, is having the conversation in a big platform. I think a lot of times we see these stories, they kind of pass us by, and they don't make any noise because Trump did something or something. And we're not talking about some of the really systemic issues. And I don't think this is just limited to State Farm. I think that this is probably an industry issue that needs to be addressed. And I think Lana's point was really important in terms of the connection to FEMA. We know after Katrina, because the hurricane, never directly hit New Orleans, the damage was from a levee breach. A lot of people had hurricane insurance, understanding that, and a lot of Black people had hurricane insurance, understanding that New Orleans is low-lying, that is protected by levees. And guess what the insurance industry said? You don't have hurricane damage. You have flood damage for which you're not covered. So people struggle to get their homes remade. This is one of the reasons why you had people in those FEMA trailers and people summed up, in the lower Ninth Ward after, Katrina had the dust had settled. A lot of this was the insurance industry and having to haggle with them over and over and over again. You would think after something that the whole world witnessed was something that affected an entire major American city, and there was an outpouring of empathy for at least a second until people realized, hey, these are Black people hurting. And then, all of a sudden the industry is finding ways to not pay people what they're owed and finding loopholes. And that's what they're really doing at State Farm. And I don't think it's just limited to State Farm. I think if you expanded this study and expanded this survey, you would find that it's probably an industry-wide issue.
That is, and that's the other part about why it's important to even have this conversation, because we know that the insurance company is racist. Whether you're talking about homeowners insurance, whether you're talking about medical, life insurance. I mean, the insurance company reaps rich off of the ignorance of people, but they reach ripped off of the ignorance and the ignorance of Black folks that don't speak out against these type of things. And I understand it, because these are major companies. They wield a lot of power in government. Insurance is a multi-billion-dollar business in this country. And so I get it. I definitely get it. And it's sad that the New York Times, a newspaper, has to bring this thing to light, because the other part of it, and I mentioned this earlier, is that insurance companies have all of these files. They have these complaints, but they're not necessarily required to open them up to the public. It's not until these these complaints are brought to the public space through another public institution like the media, where people finally get to hear the real story. But the insurance companies know. It's not like they're completely, we didn't know. You do know. As detail oriented and as I would just say as detail oriented as these insurance companies, they go down the list. Black, white, Asian, Latino. They look at your area code. I mean, your zip code. I mean, they can tell if you are in the Black neighborhood or if you're in this neighborhood or that neighborhood. The other part about this, for example, and they mentioned this in the report, in the New York Times report, that white insurance claims are settled within less than 3 interactions with State Farm representatives.
Yeah.
They are settled. So you can't run from that. You cannot run from that. They say men lie, women lie, numbers don't. You can't run from the data.
Yeah. And I think, this is something we've seen in lots of different industries. But the other thing is, it could go even farther, in terms of these long interactions and all of that. Not only can they tell what neighborhood you live in, they can judge by your name. If I see Farajii Muhammad,
right?
They can judge, by the sound of your voice on the telephone.
Right.
There are lots of different circumstances where people get a racial cue and they act accordingly. So, they hear, you or me speaking on the phone and they're like, oh, that's probably a brother. They have extra questions to ask. Right. So I think that this is, something that, they have the control. They have the data. They understand all of this. And, they hide behind this kind of race neutral stuff. Oh, we don't know about the race. Oh, all of that. Same thing the banking industry did with home loans.
Right.
It seems like every couple of years, Wells Fargo's paying out $10 million in Philadelphia. Wachovia is paying this company or this group of people in another city. So, I mean, all of this, again, with this kind of race blind, race neutral approach, none of it is really race blind and race neutral. And we know that Black people oftentimes get the short end of the stick. The industry has the ability to police itself, but chooses not to because they get more in their bottom line by trying to deny people their claims. And the interesting thing is, a lot of Black people might not know, hey, I didn't get, I was treated poorly. And then another person across the street might have been treated poorly, but you don't know until, media outlets like this actually bring this kind of stuff out into the fore. And that's why I shout out Farajii.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Karen Connor. Karen, you, my sister, checking in from LA. You said, I've been in the insurance industry for 34 years. Homeowners must consult other agents for an independent review of their coverage and insurance carrier claims practices. Don't seek the cheapest. So Karen is saying we need to look at some alternatives. Don't just stick with the big houses, but you do need to have an independent review. And I like that idea, Doc, that if you have an independent review, you can really see like the clean glass next to the dirty glass. Mm-hmm. You can see the disparity. She's also mentioned this, that she said State Farm, Allstate, and Farmers are direct writers in your city. Look for an independent agent, not a direct writer. Check their website and research their companies. So, Karen, this is a great solution that I think that a lot of folks have. And again, what generally gets us, you say, Karen, not choose the cheapest, but that's what gets us. We go to these companies because they serve volume. It's like going to Walmart, right? You go to Walmart because you can get the cheapest price because they have the highest volume of a particular item. Same thing with these companies, and maybe we need to change that culture, Doc, where it's like, okay, let's stop looking at the cheapest. Let's look at the quality and not just the quantity that the company is serving. But I love the idea of having an independent review. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think that's the, that is the product of African Americans having less wealth, having less disposable income, having all of those, the economic disparities that we suffer from. Sometimes we have to choose, the cheaper option. I love the independent review. I love the independent agents. I love all of those ideas. And one of the things that I would tell, I think you said Carol was her name.
Karen Connor.
Karen is, you need to start a website. You know what I mean? You need to make, one of the things that you can say is, I'm an Karen, and start a website, that gives this kind of information, or an app or something. And, I think Black, but also I think there's an information deficit about insurance, because I wasn't aware of that, and I'm a homeowner. I wasn't aware that you can have an independent review of your claim, and have them look at that. So I think that it's those are the kinds of things that the kind of knowledge that needs to be out there, and we need industry insiders that can actually do that. So for the good of our community.
Absolutely, Karen. I know that you tuned in. You got 34 years. We trust you. We trust your credibility, sis. We trust your credibility. Absolutely. Look, I got to take another quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to switch gears a little bit and have more conversation. Let's talk about this national conversation about mental health in the light of the suicide of our brother Stephen Twitch Boss. Stay with us. That conversation is up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. If you missed the first hour of conversation, make sure you check us out in the replay. You can check us out at blackstarnetwork.com. And also make sure you continue to support the work that we're doing here on the Black Star Network. All right, folks, big conversation that is happening. And I had to make sure that I get some insight and some thoughts from my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, Senior Lecturer for the African American Studies Department at the University of Maryland, to talk to us about this discussion that many people are having about mental health and suicide in light of the death of Stephen, famed DJ Stephen Twitch Boss. Now, there has been a number of conversations about this issue, but he himself often talked about what it took for him to overcome certain hardships as he continued to go through the dark moments of his life. And I just want to share with you some remarks that he made on a podcast just like maybe a year or so ago when he was just a father too. He actually has another child. He was a father of 3. But when he was just a father too, he shared some insight about life and how he was able to overcome these hardships. Take a look at this, folks. This is what he said on a podcast at that time. He talked about the fact that he said when you make decisions that might seem right at the time, but then they're not. For me, it just helps to know that it keeps going. It does, no matter what. Even if something seems very devastating, like there's some kind of force that's going to keep going, and it's there for you to naturally access. Your bounce back from a perceived failure or whatever, something that didn't work out for you, your bounce back immediately doesn't have to be like this Hollywood story, according to him. He said it doesn't have to be like something that you tell your friends that at the end of it, your friends are going to go, wow, because that's another little ego trip I just recently found. He could continue saying, like you're writing the intro to a book. This is what the host responded. And Boss eerily replied with a laugh. He said, I had the gun in my hand. And meanwhile, it's like some trivial stuff. I was looking at myself when I've talked about this. This is something I've for sure done. So he, and I want to bring Dr. Jason Nichols back into the discussion because Dr. Nichols, you put out a message yesterday on your Twitter feed saying to, of course, to rest in power, rest in peace, and that, your condolences go out to the family. But you, like many others have said, check on your friends. Check on the mental health of people around you. And I wanted to have this conversation because we're planning to have a therapist coming on next Tuesday, God willing, to try to go further along in this understanding this phenomenon of suicide ideation, and talking about that from a clinical perspective, but from a cultural perspective, starting with you, Doc. this conversation, and just looking back at the words of our brother, he was going through some hardships. He understood it. He also said in the same conversation that the pressures of fatherhood got to him at some point when he was just having 2 children. He's got a 3rd now. But all of those things of trying to get through those tough moments that life presents, and he essentially made the point that life still goes on, that even with hardships, it's not over. Life still goes on. So I'm trying to personally just reconcile, how do we have these discussions about something so big culturally? Because just as much as we like to extend our well wishes to the family, we are not talking about suicide in the Black community.
Absolutely. And you know, particularly post-COVID, I've seen a lot of my students who have said that they've had mental health struggles. Some have even confided that they've had suicidal thoughts and even suicide attempts. So this is something that's really important for me. And I think a lot of times, you know, when things are difficult, a lot of times within our culture, and it's been spoken about more now, we have this idea that, you know, therapy means you're crazy. And I wish we could almost ban the word crazy when we're referring to mental health, because I think, you know, it stigmatizes somebody who's in a struggle for their mental health. And sometimes it's a struggle for their lives. I think we have to answer that with empathy. Brothers need to talk to other brothers. You know, I think a lot of times we feel too strong. There are a lot of times where I've even had struggles and I've wanted to tell somebody, but I'm like, I don't want my boys to think I'm weak.
Right.
And we need to get that out of our heads, out of our culture, out of our vocabulary. It's not weak to ask for help. The strongest weightlifter in the world has a spotter. You know what I mean? And
True,
so
good point.
Sometimes you definitely need to get the weight off of your chest, so to speak. And you need a spot. And sometimes that can be a mental health professional. Sometimes it's a friend, and, you know, whomever. I would say, you know, lean toward the professional if it feels really like it's going to be really serious and it's really causing you a lot of pain. You know, you may need a professional, and there's no shame in that. The other thing that I would say from a systemic standpoint is, I know coming out of COVID, I was trying to get a therapist, and it's really hard to get.
Let me tell you, brother, you ain't lying.
Yeah, I mean, it is really difficult. Therapists are booked up, you know, right now. And one of the things that we need certainly more of our health insurance. Since we were just talking about insurance, health insurance needs to cover mental health more, because very few people, unless they are very wealthy and very elite, can afford to come out of $100 a week. And a lot of times within our community, we don't have those kinds of resources. We need to advocate for mental health to be covered more ubiquitously, and we need to check in on our friends, and we need to get rid of any kind of stigma within our community, particularly among men, where I think the stigma is even stronger, that if you are seeking help, if you're struggling with fatherhood, with parenthood, with single fatherhood, with whatever it is that's weighing you down, that you can't come get help. I think that there's nothing wrong with that. A smart person gets help when they need it. So let's actually normalize getting help.
And a couple of things that comes to my mind. First, you said normalize, and one of our culture crew members, Janae, posted, just made a comment about normalize, and I'm going to go to that in a moment. But going to the piece of talking to your friends, you know, you really have to have a strong support system to understand that level of vulnerability, right? I mean, your support system can't be like your homeboys, your homegirls, and you're just like, yeah, girl, I'm struggling here and I'm struggling. Yeah, me too. I'm struggling here. And it becomes this pity party versus a moment where you can feel like, if I share this very, very personal sentiment with this person, that they're going to take the time to step away from their own situation, give me the space to share, and then help to get me out of this dark place that I'm in. And I'm not, and one of the things, Dr. Nichols, that I'm not sure of, brother, is if our friendships in this culture of things, if we are able to handle that level of vulnerability, right? That's one of the concerning parts. Like if your friend, and I'm just saying, Culture Crew, if one of your close friends came to you and started talking about suicide ideation, where they're basically idealizing what life would be, what the earth would be without them present, could you handle that?
Right.
Can we really handle that, right? And that's one of the big, I think we need to have that part of the conversation. The other thing is, we can't talk about check on your friends and family, right? You want people to talk about suicide, but we still haven't even talked about other trauma that has affected us, whether it could be sexual trauma or some other form of trauma. Like, and I'm saying this as a group of people, as a culture, like, do we really, we got to work through that part of the conversation. If I can't tell you about something that happened to me 20 years ago that was traumatic to me, how can I expect you to handle something that I might be thinking for the past 30 days?
Right. Absolutely. I agree 100%. We have to normalize these discussions. We have to validate people's feelings. These are things that I think culturally we need to do. And we also need to normalize just the normal check-in. I can tell you there were times where I've been struggling and a friend has just called me out the blue and been like, "Hey, Jason, how you doing?" And no reason, not like, "Yo, let's go watch the game" or anything. It's just like, "Hey, how you been? You were on my mind." And you'd be shocked how far that goes when they know that they were on your mind out of nowhere.
Right.
That it was that you were thinking about them for some reason. A lot of times it makes them feel less alone. I mean, we look at Twitch, he had millions of followers, he had money, he had fame, he had a beautiful wife, he had beautiful kids. We look at that and we're like, yo, he had talent. We're like, man, he's got it made. But he was still struggling. Same thing with the kid, what was it, Jet Jackson?
Who?
The young kid who was on Nickelodeon or whatever.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, handsome young guy.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at that kid. I'm like, man, he was on television. I think he was currently on television. It wasn't even like he was, like he had fallen off. We're talking about somebody who was working. He was on Rizzoli and Isles or some show. And he was doing all these things and his career was looking up. And he still was feeling like he was alone and like he was hopeless. And I think sometimes just reaching out and saying, "Hey, how you doing, man? I'm here if you need me." That can go a long way. So we definitely need to also normalize vulnerability, particularly among Black men. Like, it's okay to be vulnerable sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, I come from that like Mob Deep generation, where everybody had to walk around and look tough all day.
Hey, bro. Hey, Doc, we from the same school then.
Yeah,
from the same school. Hey, look, it's so funny because I just saw this clip that was trending of Jay-Z when he was on Kevin Hart show, and there was this moment he talked about how this brother approached him, had this, his whole mug was broke down. And Jay said, man, I saw this brother, and he said, man, he looked straight at me, but I thought he was looking at somebody else. And he said, when he realized he was looking at him, he said, I got scared. Because this guy came up, he said he got this big scar on his face. He had his mug broke down. And he came up to Jay, and he said, hey, man, I want to know, can I get this autograph for you for my daughter? She loves you, man. And then he said, Jay-Z said, the brother smiled at him. And he said, man, he had this big smile on his face. He said, but that just goes to show me that this man had to present himself to the world the way he did because of all the pain and everything. He approached another black man, even though he was asking for just a simple autograph. He had to, you know what I mean, be tough and be hard.
Yeah.
He put a little fear in Jay-Z, like, yo, what you about to do?
Right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But see, Jay realized, he was like, that's the pain that we as black men continue to carry. You know what I mean? When you grew up in the 80s and the 90s, that's the pain. Like, everybody had that mug broke down.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So I get that. And Janae, you made this point, and then we're going to take another quick pause. But Janae, you made this point to say, here's the blind side. We are trying to normalize checking on one's mental health, mental wellness. There's resources around, especially to those who are better connected than when they speak good. Well, it's not real. So there are some resources around. You're absolutely right, Janae. And you do have people who are connected. And look, people, and another one of our culture crew members said this, Dr. Nichols. Catherine said, people don't want to expose their own demons. You can check on your friends and family, but if they are not willing or are not able to express it verbally, it will not work. So to Catherine, to Janae's point, you could talk and say, hey, I'm just checking on you. Everything good? You all right? But if somebody say, I'm good, I'm well. What you gonna go deeper? No, are you really good? Are you really well? I mean, we don't do that.
Right, but I think at the same time, if we normalize opening up, particularly for men, if we normalize, like, it's okay to be like, you know, I've had better days. And again, it doesn't have to be a pity party, because nobody likes somebody who's always doing bad. But, you know, and if they are always doing bad, then, hey, you know, bro, you might need to get some help. You know what I mean? We need to normalize that. Just like if you were walking around with a limp, I'd be like, yo, you need to get that knee checked out, or that ankle.
Right.
You know, why wouldn't I say, bro, there's nothing, I'm not calling you crazy. I'm just saying, bro, you know, maybe you would feel, I want you to, you know, just like I would want somebody to be able to walk straight, I'd want them to for their mind to be in good health and condition. So I think, you know, promoting mental health, promoting help, and also, you know, for me, someone and other people who may teach young people, let them know that, you know, healthcare, in particular mental health, but healthcare altogether, is a good field for Black people to get into. We need more Black men who are therapists, because I'll be honest, I wanted a Black male therapist, you know, because, you know, even though there are Black women who are very qualified and white women who are very qualified and Asian, etc., it's always good when you feel safe and when you feel not judged. And I think that's one of the things that Black people benefit from when they have a Black healthcare provider. And so I think we should promote that to our young people. We need more young people in medical school. We need more young people becoming psychologists, and you can serve your community that way.
Absolutely. Let me take a quick pause as we continue to have this conversation about Twitch and mental health. Continue to post your comments, folks, and stay with us. More coming at you right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black
own media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, we have been having a conversation about DJ Steven Twitch boss and mental health concerns. There's been so much talk about checking in on people and understanding mental health and wellness in light of the suicide of the famed DJ. I've been talking to Dr. Jason Nichols, getting his insight and his thoughts on this, as this is a conversation that we often aren't having enough of until we hear about someone that we have great love and respect for, hear about someone who has taken their own life. And so this is just like one of many discussions that we're going to have about mental health next week. I plan to be talking to a therapist on Tuesday to discuss, what are some of the ways that the community can respond. And you don't have to be a famous DJ to get the help that you need, to get the resources behind you, and most importantly, to feel like someone cares about you. You can create that own infrastructure for yourself, and we'll learn more about that next week. But Dr. Nichols, looking at the bigger picture of the health disparities, and one of our culture crew members checked in on the chat and said that, and I haven't seen this video, so I'm gonna just throw it out there because I trust that my team, my crew is saying saying the right things here. But they said that Twitch had put out a video maybe 24 hours before his body was found, where he talked about being Black in America. He talked about just some of the psychological damage of it, that there was a sense that, he may have not felt like he was living his expressing his Blackness correctly. And even if he didn't say it, but we know that is very real. That is very real. And that's a part of the discussion that we definitely not having. I mean, even though we kind of joke about it, and part of me is like, Black folks, we're resilient as hell. We already know that. But some things shouldn't be joked about. You know what I mean? There are some real damage. Like when you are living in a country, or you are part of systems where your voice is not being heard, your Blackness is not being accepted, your humanity is not being seen, that just weighs down on you each and every day. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't get a job. You're always profiled. You're always discriminated against. I mean, you just come up against roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And death seems like heaven for some Black folks that just feel like they can't get past the racism, the discrimination, the overall pain of being Black in America. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And now goes back to the point that I was making about everyday racism. It's something where, imagine somebody is poking you with a pin over and over and over again. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you're going to, you'll survive it. But if it's happening every single day, that wound starts to get bigger and bigger. It doesn't heal. And that's what happens when you have these little indignities that happen to Black people every single day. And sometimes they're in really important settings. Who knows what Twitch, who's, like I said, famous and had a big following, when he went into business meetings, who knows the little indignities that he had to suffer? Anyway, not being treated or talked to like a man or like an adult. That can be really, really frustrating, and
let's talk about the indignities. I mean, his wife was white, right? And he had biracial children, right? And that's who he loved. That's not the issue. But to the outside world who may not have a better understanding of that, right? There are some people that may, if a Black man is growing into in understanding his Blackness, he might question some personal choices. Now, he might question some personal choices, right? That he might say, I'm at this point, now I'm feeling this way. Like, I don't know. And I'm certainly not trying to put anything crazy on a man's legacy, but I'm just saying we know that can happen.
We definitely know one thing, and that's that whatever it is he's experiencing as a black man, his wife has never experienced that. That's not to say that she would never be empathetic. That's not saying that she didn't love him and care about him and listen to, but she didn't necessarily, she's never lived it in the way that, another black person would, which is why I think you have to, expand your tribe, you know what I mean? And make sure that you have people who can kind of, empathize because they've seen some of the things that you experience, but I think, questioning some of his choices, I think that's something that anybody who is having suicidal ideations is probably experiencing. They're probably all experiencing, like, did I make the right life choices? Am I actually an asset to my wife, to my family, to my children, or am I actually a liability? And I think a lot of times when you're going through a mental health trouble or a mental health issue, you can't see that you're actually an asset. You only see the liabilities. You only see your mistakes. And that's something that I think he was probably going through and other people out there go through. And that's where I think sometimes having that pep talk from your bro or from a mental health professional who can steer you in that right direction. They're not supposed to give you a pep talk, but they can steer you in the right direction so that you realize, you know what? Me being here is important for my wife.
Right.
Being here is important for my kids. I can actually help them. They're actually going to be hurting worse if I'm not here, and I think that is the disconnect that a lot of people experience. And it's a shame that it ended this way for him, but hopefully, this will be a watermark or a watershed, moment in Black mental health, where we start to really say, hold up, we really need to pay attention to this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Doc, and Doc, I want to get your take on this because there's another element of this, and I just saw this today, and I was like, kind of going back and forth whether I should even bring it up into the conversation. But after I talked to a couple of a source of mine, they're saying that this may be the other thing. One of the things, and this is one of the big details that has emerged, he checked into a hotel 24 hours before his body was found, right? Like the day before his body was found. There is as of right now, there has been no talk of any type of suicide note or any type of letter. You know what I mean? Where you mostly see if a person takes their own life, that they would leave some sort of something to say to their family. None of that has been discovered yet. So it has now taken, this particular case has now taken on a different life of its own, where I've even seen the likes of like a Dr. Umar Johnson. He put it out on his Twitter saying that there should be an investigation into the death of this brother, that suicide may not be, kind of just shedding a little doubt and suspicion on whether it was really about suicide or was it something else that may have been at play here. Some people got mad at Dr. Umar Johnson saying, oh my gosh, too early. We don't need this. And other people saying, well, let's look into this because he is a man that seemed to have it all, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. So why would he just take himself out like that? And I'm just wanting to kind of get your take on this. Like, how do we should we even go down that line of trying to see if there was some other cause at play? Because this doesn't look like your quote unquote your typical suicide, especially without that, that final note.
Well, I think one of the things about Dr. Johnson and what he's doing right now is he's kind of grasping at straws. I don't think there's a whole lot of evidence or even, conspiracy that would say, maybe we should look at that. But I do think any time that there's a violent death, there has to be an autopsy. And if something comes out of that autopsy that looks a little strange, I don't know what it could be. Maybe he's left-handed, he gets shot in the, on the right side of his head or something like that, where it might raise suspicions, then yes, definitely we should look into more. But right now, I think it looks like he had a caring, loving spouse who went to the police, who realized that he had left without his car or anything like that. He checked into a hotel himself. And, you know, of course, there's probably camera footage of him checking in. If the camera footage shows he checked in with somebody or anything like that, then yeah, investigation. But right now, it seems like Dr. Umar is kind of grasping at straws and looking for a conspiracy where there's really no kind of indication that one exists. But definitely there should be, you know, all of the normal protocols. When you commit suicide, there is an autopsy. They don't just say, hey, it's suicide. You know, they look into it. And that's definitely should happen in this case.
Yeah, I would agree with you, brother, because, you know, when I saw that and I saw how some people have ran with it. And, you know, every time you have a suspicious death, right? I think that's like the first go-to is like, all right, we're going to try to make sense of it. Oh, somebody took this man out and all of those type of things. And it's like, I understand. I definitely understand. I just don't want that to be the talking point,
right?
To supersede the fact that we need to have some real conversations about mental health and wellness in our community, right?
Right.
So I'm hoping that the autopsy will reveal something definitive rather than just opening up the doors to a Pandora's box of, you know, anything could have happened. And it's just sad, man. It's really, really sad. And it's like, this is part of the culture that we live in, Doc, where in this day and time, if you are a high profile, especially if you are a Black entertainer, you're working in so many different spaces and you die suddenly at the quote unquote top of your game, there's always going to be some talk that some foul play may have been the reason for your death. And I don't know if that's really helpful for the culture or not. I mean, it's certainly understandable to think that way, but at the end of the big scheme of things, I'm not sure if it's helpful.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, I've seen some of the conspiracies as well. Some people have said that maybe he had lost his savings in the FTX collapse, so that he was depressed. That's been a theory that people have. You know, I don't think that this helps his family. I don't think it helps his wife, who's got 3 relatively small children to take care of by herself. I think right now we should just, you know, show an outpouring of love. And if something else pops up, you know, then you can explore it.
Absolutely.
And even it's still a mental health issue. You know what I mean? Because, you know, there are people who go broke and, you know, still are there for their families and still survive. And I have no doubt that he has good enough friends in high places that he could find ways to earn some of his wealth back. And he would have been okay. But obviously there was a deeper issue there. And that's the conversation that we need to be having as a culture and as a people.
Absolutely. Dr. Jason Nichols, Senior Lecturer of African-American Studies at the University of Maryland. Doc, it's always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much, dear brother, for being on with us. Thank you for being so good for the culture.
Absolutely. Thank you, my brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, more conversation. Stay with us. It's The Culture on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196. Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
All right, folks, we want to bring you up to speed on some breaking news that has come across the wire where a former Texas police officer was found guilty of manslaughter for the shooting death of Tatiana Jefferson at her home. Here's a picture of former Fort Worth, Texas police officer, Mr. Dean. Dean, who is white, faces up to 20 years in prison for the conviction. He pled not guilty to murder. A charge would carry a possible sentence of 5 to 99 years, according to the reports from CNN. Jurors were instructed yesterday, to also consider the lesser included offense of manslaughter. There were members of Tatiana Jefferson's family in the courtroom when the verdict was read, who had an expressionless look on their face in the courtroom. Defense attorneys had said that, according to the report, that Dean fired in self-defense. But prosecutors argued that there was no evidence he saw a gun in the black woman's hand before firing through a bedroom window. Jefferson's 11-year-old nephew, who was with her at the time, and Dean's police partner responded with him to what they believe was a burglary, with the primary witnesses to the shooting, and testified at the trial. And this verdict comes more than 3 years after the incident, where Dean and his partner responded to a call to Jefferson's house around 2:25 a.m. on October the 12th, 2019. This was a call that was made to the non-emergency police line to report that her doors were open, and when they came onto the scene, the defense counted that Dean fired his weapon in self-defense while quote unquote fearing for his life, and what his attorney said was a tragic accident, but not a criminal act. Take a look at her. I want to, in Keenan and Ariel, let's put the picture of our sister, Tatiana Jefferson. I mean, clearly this sister was not a person who you would think to be a criminal. And, you know, if you notice here, and this is one of the many cases that Brother Roland has been covering on RMU, but take a look at her and then just let me know when we can, if we can get her picture up, because I just want to let folks see her face, her beautiful smiling face. And you know, for us here on The Culture, one of the things that, And I will just be for full transparency, making sure that we keep these conversations going, but we're having them in a different way. And I truly appreciate Brother Roland for staying on top of these cases, so many cases. That's our sister right there, Tatiana Jefferson, who was with her nephew during the time that she was shot and killed. And it's an unfortunate circumstance. Black women, we understand that Black women their cases, their voices are not heard, especially when it comes to, incidents with law enforcement. And so there may be some semblance of justice in this particular case with this verdict, but this is something that that the family has been kind of waiting for this unjustified killing of our sister, especially in her own home. And it's just a sad state of affairs. Folks, I'm going to give you an opportunity to share your thoughts with us as we have this conversation. If you want to share any comments or you want to just put anything out there into the universe, because that family of Tatiana Jefferson need our hearts, heartfelt sentiments and our prayers. And getting this verdict may bring some level of closure to the family. I want to go to you as my culture crew. So many of you are checking in about this situation. Sandy, my sister, you checked in and said it's annoying at the least that the system made through sentencing get less time. Accident, right. Making her life less important because he wore a uniform. Yeah, absolutely. Lana, you said, never forget, we will always speak your name, Queen. Absolutely. Tatiana Jefferson. Let's say it with me. You don't like my music. You posted another no-knock warrant. Those have to be abandoned. Yeah. Abolished, excuse me. You said that. Absolutely, bro. Absolutely. No-knock warrants have to be abolished. Of course, we know that this is the situation with the Breonna Taylor case as well. DeAndre, you say, I'm going to put something out there, lock all these devils up. That's all I have to say about it. Yeah, it's understandable. And DeAndre, my guy, you appreciate you for sharing your thoughts. Love Big 41, you checked in and there should be murder. He should get the full 20. Yep, absolutely. Tiana, thank you, Love Big 41. Tiana, you checked in and said he's going to be held in protective custody and get out early unless the DOJ, Department of Justice, steps in for violating her civil rights. And it's always interesting, isn't it, Tiana, that we talk about violation of civil rights after the person has been killed. They talk about the civil rights conversation afterwards, not before, how civil rights was not even considered to keep that person here on earth, but afterwards. Now we got to talk about that. Not to say that that's what you're doing, but I'm just saying that's what we've often seen in these cases. It's like now you can do the one lawsuit about gross negligence or, reckless endangerment, but then you have that civil rights lawsuit after the person is killed. McCole, thank you. Thank you, Tiana, for posting that. McCole, you checked in. You said our sister Tatiana was in her own home. She should have not been murdered. Absolutely. 2019, folks. Y'all know that. You know how things were going back then. And now we're 3 years later. Ming Lee, Natasha Serge, you said, note to self, never get on Shalinda's bad side. I hear that. McCole, but I appreciate you for saying that. And this just goes to show you we still got a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done in this whole process, because we can't allow certain cases to just die off. And more importantly, it's not just even the case. It's really about making sure that our sisters and our young Black men and anybody that's in the community, they can't be forgotten, man. They cannot be forgotten. Remember, I think it was just yesterday or the day before, we talked about how they're doing that George Floyd Racial Justice Memorial and Healing Center in Minnesota. And, we want to, there has to be a place. And I'm really hoping maybe the Biden administration are thinking about this. Maybe the Department of Justice can do something like this. But there has to be a place. There has to be some sort of memorial, some healing place There got to be some healing place that on a federal level that can be erected for the victims of police, of law enforcement. If you can't keep track of, if the federal government doesn't have a mechanism to keep track of these shootings and these killings, maybe a memorial, a special wall, or some sort of memorial center, or some sort of place outside the Department of Justice or outside somewhere that people can find peace. And I'm talking about a federally protected space where our people, the names of individuals who have lost their lives unjustifiably by police officers, those who serve, those who are supposed to serve and protect, there has to be a place for them. Lana, you said also, I'm over lawsuits. Our value is getting devalued by lawsuits. No money is worth any Black life. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. And I don't think it's good for the culture for us as Black folks that we always think it's about the lawsuit, the money. Because if it was, God forbid, if it was one of my family members, or God forbid it's one of your family members, right? But any one of us can be affected just in a drop of a dime, but it wouldn't be about the money. It wouldn't be about the money. Willie, you checked in, you said no Blacks was on the jury. The prosecutor did a great job. Wow. 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 Marcus, you said this is about protecting and preserving our human rights before they're violated. That goes back to that civil rights conversation. Absolutely, Marcus. I'm with you 1,000%, brother. Let's talk about protecting and preserving our civil rights before we get shot and killed. Not afterwards. And then we're talking about, oh, we got to have a civil rights lawsuit. Well, damn, I can't enjoy it. I can't enjoy my civil rights because I'm not here. They can't enjoy it. Absolutely. Ramona J, you checked in and said, rest in peace, Tatiana. Tatiana, the dispatcher must provide accurate and detailed information. Oh, woo. Ramona, go ahead. It makes me think back to our little brother, and his name escapes me, but his case, remember a couple of years ago, and I think it was in Cleveland, where there was the call, and they said that there was a little Black boy in the park, like a neighbor had called saying there was a boy in the park playing with a gun. And it happened to be a plastic gun. But the police rolled up on the scene and within less than 3 seconds, jumped out the car, shot him, and killed this little brother. Tamir Rice, thank you. Thank you, Conscious Thought. Tamir Rice. I'm telling you, I'm so sorry. It's just so many cases. You like, whoa, the names. And that's why I said we got to keep up with the names. Because unfortunately, there's so many names that you start to be like, well, let me go back to this case and let me go back to that case. So you're right, Tamir Rice. But it was the call. It was that 911 dispatcher call, right? They went through that call, and remember the controversy around like what was described during that call. Well, I think it's a gun. I think the way he's playing with it. No 12-year-old boy is going to be flipping a gun. And I mean, come on. One Adam 112. Adam, you said we need to end qualified immunity. Now, absolutely. This is the law, the policy that allows police officers to be protected. Excuse me. This is a policy that allows police officers to be protected within their role. So they're not held liable. Qualified immunity. Absolutely. That's absolutely. Look. And so we want to just acknowledge this. We wanted to share this news with you, acknowledge it. I'm sure Brother Roland is going to continue to talk about this and the implications of it. But look at our sister right there, Tatiana Jefferson. Hopefully this will be just part of the process to bring some sort of justice and healing to the family. And I hope that Mr. Dean gets all that he needs to get in making sure he get the book thrown at him. He has to do the full time and be held all the way responsible for the killing of our beloved sister. We got to take a quick pause. When we come back, more of the culture. Stay with us. It's the culture on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, for our final news topic, we wanted to share something in the show on a high note. And it's always a joyous occasion when one of our great civil rights leaders, one of our great leaders, and one of our, just the visionaries and luminaries is given the credit that is necessary and is due. Well, this is the case for our brother John Lewis. Y'all know who brother John Lewis is, who talks about making sure that you get into good trouble. Well, our dear beloved brother is now being honored by the United States Postal Service. And in an announcement that was made earlier this week, the USPS said they are now going to be making available next year the John Lewis stamp. Take a look at this, folks. This stamp, of course, is going to be a way to celebrate the life and legacy of our dear beloved brother. And that's a beautiful picture of him. The new stamp will honor the civil rights legend, John Lewis, and the icon, John Lewis. And according to a statement from the United States Postal Service, how John Lewis, they're going to celebrate the life and legacy, who risked his life to protest segregation and other injustices in the violent Jim Crow South. According to their statement coming from USPS, they say that he was devoted to equality and justice for all Americans. John Lewis spent more than 30 years in Congress, steadfastly defending and building on key civil rights gains that he had helped achieve in the 1960s, even in the face of hatred and violence, as well as some 45 arrests. Lewis remained resolute in his commitment to what he liked to call good trouble. 45 arrests, 30 years of service. And I want to say, folks, that, when we look at civil rights leaders, I know that there are many different schools of thought out there about how Black people in this country can get to a place of liberation, how we can get through a place of freedom, justice, and equality, right? But there's good in all of our great ones. You may not always agree with their strategies. We may not always agree with the tactics, but that does not mean that they don't have something to offer to add to the eventual progress of Black people in this country. And one of the things you cannot take away from John Lewis is that as a young man, as he stood on that Edmund Pettus Bridge, and he was being beaten down on that Bloody Sunday demonstration, and he, as a young man, had made the decision that he would give his life for the cause of civil rights for Black people in this country. He made that decision. He stayed committed to that decision. And that decision brought him to the place, from the bloody streets of Selma, Alabama, to the halls of Congress. He always stayed committed to that decision. And so, you know, I'm happy that the United States Postal Service is going to be honoring him on the stamp, but it's more than just a stamp. It's just at least a recognition of what our brother has brought to the table. And more importantly, us having conversations with young people in our family to build off what he did. Again, this is not about his personal politics as much as it about his stand and the stand that he continues to take. He took during, I don't know if anybody would endure that type of heat. 45 arrests. Whew. Whew. He got me after walking the bridge. I don't know if we can, if you were to go through the pain and the sacrifice that brother made, would you still be standing? Would you still be talking about making good trouble? I don't know. So every one of our people have something of value to give to the liberation of Black folks. So, you know, again, we want to give a big shout out to John Lewis, continue to lift his name, and to continue to not only just celebrate his life and legacy, to study it, and to take the good things, the things that we may agree, and even taking the things that we may not disagree about, but to study it, to have a better understanding of how we can take this journey, this path, our people to the next level. So again, the United States Postal Service will make his stamp available in the beginning parts of next year. So big shout out to him. All right, folks, that's going to do it for today's show. I want to thank Dr. Jason Nichols for checking in. And I certainly want to thank you for being a part of the conversation. Make sure y'all go to blackstarnetwork.com, see all of the latest content that we have streaming right now, whether it's the culture, RMU, Get Wealthy, the Pivot, all of the dynamic programming that we have. We want you to check us out. So go to Black Star Network. Also, we are looking for your support. Continue to support us financially. Continue to share the content. Please subscribe to the network, as you can do so for free. Download it on all of your devices. And most importantly, make sure that you continue to tell your friends and family about it. Follow us on social media, and follow me, yours truly, on social media at The Real Farajii and Farajii on Twitter. Thank you to my fantastic production team. Stay tuned. Up next is Rolling Martin Unfiltered at 6 p.m. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting and informative edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Have a great afternoon and evening. Peace.